Hi there guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. And today I'm going to be discussing how contracts actually work in sim racing, because for a lot of you guys who do sim racing for fun or just do it casually, whatever, a lot of you guys probably don't understand how contract negotiations work when it comes to moving team. I know that I certainly didn't know what it actually entailed really until I took the plunge myself, but it was definitely very eye-opening for me to sort of begin to speak with other teams and team managers and sort of try and figure out what would be the right fit. So I'm going to go through a few things that I basically experienced that were a bit of a surprise to me, and sort of what the main aspects are when it comes to negotiating a contract with a new team. So with that, let's get into the video and I'll explain further. So the first thing that you really start discussing when you have that first meeting, say you want to move team and you've messaged the other team manager saying, I'm looking for a change. I want to find a new home, and maybe to try and improve your results. There's countless reasons, right, for moving team. And as I discussed in a previous video, that there was just countless reasons why Apex and I weren't a good fit anymore, and the main one really was just the vision for the team didn't match my vision. That was the long and short of it. Money was also a large contributing factor, but in terms of like atmosphere and friendship and stuff, that was never a reason for me moving team. I've still got a lot of respect and a lot of love for all the guys at Apex. I still speak to a lot of them. So it was never because of a falling out or an argument or a disagreement or things like that. It was literally just I wanted to improve my results. The vision of the team didn't match mine, so therefore I wouldn't be able to achieve said results, and I wanted to be paid slightly more than I was being paid. The first thing is, as I say, you reach out to them, you say what you're looking for, just sort of get to know the manager in that first sort of meeting. You get to kind of get a vibe of what they're like as a person, what the general vibe of the team is, what their aspirations are, how things work there, because every team has slightly different operations. If it comes to practice times, telemetry analysis, test race schedules, things like that, you need to sort of understand, am I joining a team that only really practices in the evening? For me, with a family, I tend to not practice in the evening. That's more sort of family time. I get in the rig at sort of 8 or 9 a.m. most mornings, practice through until about 5. So the evenings are sort of not where I'm going to be doing the majority of my work. So I've got to make sure that I'm surrounded by people who are going to be on at the same time. If we want to do a test race at 1 in the afternoon, we can do a test race at 1 in the afternoon. So generally that's just kind of, you get a bit of a feel, and then near the end of the meeting, typically that's when we would start to discuss financials. Like, it's always the kind of elephant in the room, right? You don't want to go into a meeting talking about money straight away. As I said earlier, you discuss how the team operates, what the team's targets are, what their aspirations are for the coming couple of years, right? So that you can get a bit of a gauge on what it's going to be like if you were to sign a longer term deal. Contract lengths typically aren't really discussed. I think most teams sort of work on a year-to-year basis, just because esports and sim racing is so volatile in this moment. Although Pesky's been running for a long time, they don't sign like 3-year deals where like drivers get confirmation that PES is going to be around until 2027. It's literally a year-to-year thing where Porsche could decide 1 year, we don't want to back this anymore, and all of a sudden the series is gone. And the same thing kind of works with Rensport, right? Like no one has a long-term picture on what's actually going on. So for us, we're literally working on a year-to-year basis. When every single season ends, we're sitting going into Christmas wondering if we're going to have another season, or if we're going to have to completely change career paths. Like, do I need to go back to iRacing and start competing on that again? The main thing after that, as I say, you're sort of waiting to get a response back from the manager to say, yeah, budget's been approved, or they say, I couldn't quite get you that amount, this is kind of what we're looking at for the next 12 months, this is how much you can expect to get paid. It sort of came to the end of it where I had like 3 or 4 teams on the table, not with a contract sat in front of me, but like with unofficial sort of offers. Once you get those unofficial offers through, I then had to just sort of weigh them all up, write them all down, like this is how much you're going to get paid every month, this is how long the contract length is, you know, do you get paid the same when you're not racing as to when you do? Because there's some teams that will pay you a reduced rate in the off season because you're technically not doing anything, whereas there's other teams that will just pay you all year round. They'll just pay you the same amount. So you've got to take that into account. And as I say, me and my partner, we sat down and, you know, I sort of said to her, look, these are the offers I've got on the table. She said, this is the one I think you should go with, but you know, it's up to you. And then at that point you go back to the team and you just sort of say, look, like, I'm happy to go ahead with this, can we get a contract written up? And you know, for Virtus, for example, everything happened very quickly. They were like the last team that I spoke to, and I was literally on the verge of signing with another team. And then that night I'd just spoken to a team manager in the afternoon. Then that night I was like, right, I think I'm going to go with this team. And then all of a sudden Virtus came out of nowhere and were like, yeah, we're interested, can we set up a meeting in like 10 minutes? I was like, oh, okay, right. Went and spoke to Anton. As I said earlier, you know, we had that initial discussion about what we're looking for, what the long-term plans are, what the team is going to look like for this coming season. And then at the end we discussed money and what the financials are going to look like. He then went away. Within 24 hours the budget had been approved, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is moving a lot quicker than everyone else had spoken to. But at this point, right, it was getting up towards Christmas where most people are going to be sort of packing up for the year and like are sort of done, so they want to get deals done before we turn into the new year. Then literally took a couple of weeks, got the contract through. Yeah, I had to read through, everything was good. Money was as we discussed. A few more questions, maybe had another couple of meetings with Anton just to sort of make sure I had everything right in my head. I knew exactly what I was reading in the contract, what I was signing for, and at that point signed the contract and just waited until the start date, and then you start. And then at that point you start getting in like your team clothing, you're getting used to your new teammates, getting to know them, you know, having a discussion amongst the drivers of what each person's like and saying, okay, how can I interact with this person? Can I have a good joke with them, or are they a bit more reserved? I need to just sort of slowly warm up to them, sort of thing. And then eventually start working together, see what the pace is like, get a gauge of like, okay, who's top dog, who needs a bit more support. And then as a collective, you'll just sort of work together to try and get everyone as close to the top guy. And that's essentially the long and short of it. It's nothing too sort of groundbreaking. You know, I'm sure compared to other esports, sim racing is still very, very immature compared to them. But yeah, the whole process is really, you know, I've sort of broken that down into like a 10-minute sort of discussion. This took over 6 months for me, you know, having meetings with team managers and discussing terms, getting unofficial offers through. You know, Virtus were the first ones that actually sent me an official contract. So, you know, that was kind of, along with, you know, what they'd offered me, and plus I had a physical contract sat in front of me, that was the difference of why I decided to go with them. So yeah, that is pretty much all of it. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you've got any further questions about how contracts work and, you know, how things are actually behind the scenes when it comes to negotiations and maybe even receiving offers from other teams, you haven't necessarily gone looking for them. What if another team wants you? How does that kind of work? You know, you guys can ask those questions below. I'm more than happy to answer them. As I say, that was a first for me going through this whole moving team process, and you know, it sort of taught me quite a lot about what I actually want out of this career and what I want to achieve over the next 5-10 years, however long my career may last. Yeah, can't wait to get going. I do plan on doing like a review of each race and sort of discussing what I was thinking about in that moment. You know, what I was contending with in the car, things that had happened behind the scenes before the race that had maybe contributed to a certain situation that we're dealing with, or things like that, and just sort of give you guys a more behind the scenes of the series as a whole, because I understand that viewership isn't fully there for Rensport, but we need to engage more people and show them actually what goes on behind the scenes and what is happening, because no one really knows, not even just in Rensport, but for anything, for iRacing, ACC, you name it, F1 esports. Yeah, with that, I will let you guys go, and hopefully you guys did enjoy. Again, if you've got any questions or anything, ask them down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.